I would like to call to order the Board of Trustees meeting for June 5th, 2018. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. I would ask all of you to please make sure your cell phones are either on silent or turned off. I think everyone notices we have the deputy clerk tonight because he doesn't look at all like Irene. So if the deputy clerk would please call the roll.
Trustee Chamber.
Here.
Trustee Ford.
Here.
Trustee Goldstein Epson. Trustee Haber.
Here.
Trustee Hollander. Here. Trustee Jamerson Epson. Trustee Norris.
Here. We have a quorum. All right, first order of business this evening is approval of business from the Board of Trustees meeting for May 15th, 2018. Do I hear a motion for approval?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Second. Okay. Any additional corrections or modifications? Hearing none, all in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Next, Director of Community Services report.
The major, a couple of major tickets in court this month coming up. One, a house on Chicory, and an adjacent property which has a Deerfield Road address. The numerous violations of vacant home. Was derelict vehicles, was ticket at the time I wrote the ticket, I think they're all gone. For one house, there's a couple left on the second property, it's in common ownership. Vacant building, it's not registered with the village, all kinds of property maintenance issues with the house, fume paint. So some of the violations have been corrected, and some have not, so that's a court case coming up this month. Second letter is going out for septic system testing reminders. We have till July, 9 or 10 properties in the village that are on the septic system. And that's all I have.
Any questions for the Director of Community Services? All right, hearing none, Plan Commission report.
Sherry?
No, we're ready
I
now.
wasn't there, you were there.
Well, we're working on issues with regard to the plan and the vision statements that we're looking at, and we will continue discussing them on Thursday. Succinct.
The topics in particular that we have in mind to discuss Thursday are woodlands and drainage is one of the main subtopics in the existing comprehensive plan. And the other major subtopic is gateway streets and paths. We're trying to take a couple of the subtopics at each meeting. We have about 8 of them, so it'll take us a few meetings to get through them. And the idea is to go through the language, the verbiage that we have in the existing plan, and now upgrade and revise it now that we've had a lot of discussion and thoughts about where we want to go.
Okay, any questions for the Plan Commission? Hearing none, Treasurer's report.
I don't have an official report. I have not prepared with the main statements, but I will get those, and I will also talk to our investment advisor from Chase as we wanted an update on a meeting with her, Danielle. We met with Karen, the banker aspect of it, and are switching to the new management account, which will, I think, be both a cost savings and a lot of benefits for the village. But I will prepare either a meeting date or a phone conversation, whichever is going to work best with our actual advisor on the state of the funds and the investment horizon as interest rates have crept up a little bit on maturities. But I'll put that all together when I get the May reports.
Okay, any questions for Treasurer? Hearing none, moving forward to the Consultants for Walt Hamilton.
We're out for bids for this year's road contract. We have that bid opening next Tuesday morning, so I expect to bring a recommendation back to the board at the meeting 2 weeks from tonight.
That's all I
Are there any questions for the engineer? Okay, village attorney?
At the next board meeting, we'll probably have a resolution for the board setting a time and place for a public hearing on establishing the second TIF district. The hearing has to be sometime out because we have a number of notices and meetings to have, so it might be 90, 100-something days out from the date of the resolution. I'll have a timeline for you. I just wanted to give you a heads up that we'll have that at the next meeting. Secondly, as Pat just said, we're going to get bids for this road work, and that includes a lot of road work for SSA 19, Hiawatha Woods. And I've been in contact with the bank. I hope to get some proposal for buying our SSA bonds for SSA 19 to be $300,000 approximately, if the costs come in what we think. So there's a possibility that we'll have a bond ordinance on the agenda for the next meeting. If not, maybe the first meeting in July. We want to see where the numbers come in and make sure that we're in the striking range to be able to pay for the work with the amount that they've authorized to borrow. I have no idea what the rates would be at the moment. I'll get back to you on that. We'll do a first reading of a couple of ordinances tonight, possibly, and then we'll want to update the fee schedule at the next meeting, the second meeting in June. So if anyone has any additions or thoughts about the fee schedule, this would be a good time to let me know.
Could you send out a digital copy of the fee schedule as a reminder, because I can't remember. I know we have a lot of different topic areas on it, and I don't recall all of them.
All right, I have gotten comments from the chief, I've gotten comments from Steve Zimmerman on some of the cost share programs. There's probably some other stragglers there. There's a presentation by Dr. Willis and Swaco at the next meeting, but just to give you a heads up, we have received a proposal from Lakeshore for renewing their contract, and I think the idea is we were going to recommend that the board accept the proposal, and I guess that by the next meeting we'll have a summary of that. It's basically a renewal for about 3 years. It would terminate at the same time as the contracts with Vandenberg and Deerfield, so that at the time they terminate, would all go out together. That's the theory. And the prices that they're proposing would be right in line with what we're paying now, but just staying basically on the trend line of the bumps that we've been getting. We did ask them to give us a year off from those bumps, and they agreed.
And I shouldn't be stealing my thunder from the next meeting, but you should know that in 2011, when we went out for bids and went with Lakeshore, the waste management bid was $32 plus a month, and that would have been increased at 2.8% a year. And the bids we have from Lakeshore are the prices we have from Lakeshore are still below that figure 7 years later. So obviously we're well ahead. They're comparable with the other communities. And Walter will be here to help address that.
First, it's not contagious. Shows my dedication to being public. I assume that the Bannockburn and Deerfield contracts do not expire prior to 3 years. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're matching the three together. And the idea is they're all three with Lakeshore. We will be able to go out for bids together with a population of approximately 25,000 as opposed to 3,000. We also benefit from the fact that Deerfield and Bannockburn also have group housing, which is part of the contract, which obviously is much more desirable from the point of view of the hauler, when you get one big dumpster to dump instead of having to go to every home. And Deerfield is also more densely populated, which is a big difference. And finally, Bannockburn, although they do have a small population and large lots, their streets are all much wider and paved. So we have some people who will have much lower overhead for the hauler, who we should be able to take advantage of as part of our contract bidding. So we feel like that should be a very advantageous situation.
The last thing I wanted to bring up, and I'm sorry I forgot to even mention this to you, but I'm going to bring it up. The mayor and I met last minute impromptu. The meeting that I thought was called off came back in less than a half-hour notice before we were supposed to start, and so we rushed over here. And then the gentleman had to leave in 40 minutes, so I'm sorry that we didn't try and rush you over. So we met with representative of Park Street Realty, who was,
Chris just asked a question.
Yeah, what are we talking about?
the mayor and I had a meeting a couple of days ago, last week, to discuss a concept with Clark Street Realty, which is one of the firms that responded to the request for proposal when we went out to try and develop the village on lot.
Could you speak clearer, please? You're mumbling.
I'll try.
Please?
So we sat down with Representative of Clark Street Realty, and we discussed the concepts of engaging with them on the basis of there being a, some towns call it a designated or preferred developer. The idea being that they would basically work at no cost for us, attempting to find a user for the village-owned parcel that we're happy with. They would have ultimately the right to develop the building if they find someone that's acceptable to the village. I think that I have to look and see to what extent we need to either renotice or go through what process again. We have, this is one of the companies that we vetted quite significantly, met with them. We're very impressed with their proposal when we were considering, this is the village lot at the corner of Deerfield Road and Milwaukee Avenue at the southeast corner. One of the factors that the mayor and I have been ruminating over is the fact that the two other people, the firms that we met with at that time, when we went out with the RFP, both have competing developments going on at that corner, at the other side of the intersection. So we reached out to the third firm that is not conflicted in that way, because we know that they had an interest in the area. We know that they had studied that intersection, and that they were the ones who were attempting to bring, at the time, a Starbucks or a user like that to that corner. So they've sent us a couple of agreements that they've entered into with other municipalities for us to look at. We wanted to sort of take the temperature of the board a little bit. The thinking here is that, as they said to us, this is becoming a very hot area. There's a lot of momentum because of women's, because of the development. And what we can observe is that the village doesn't have anyone whose sole job and thought and function in life is to find the best use for that. You're not set up for that. You don't have Department of Economic Development. You don't have those resources, and you're not thinking every day about how to come up with the best user for this deal. I think they made, at least to my ears, they made a very compelling argument to think about this type of process as a way to get a user there that we really want. I asked them whether, because one of the holdups with selecting them originally was that they were proposing the village think about additional improvements on Deerfield Road. And we didn't want to be burdened with that cost, although it turns out that some of those improvements are now underway anyway because of Woodlands. In terms of even further improvements that would provide a total access into the village a lot, their recommendation was, let's go out first and see what we can get without doing that, because the world is changing now. When they see the reality of Woodlands, the world has changed. So I'm not looking for any kind of decision or immediate feedback. I just wanted to sort of share the idea with you that we were thinking about how to do something like this. And we'll have other materials at another meeting where we can show how this relationship would work, what some of the parameters would be.
Would this be limited only to the corner?
So-
Or would it be just a general, thank you.
So we asked them to consider other options that would update, rehabilitate, improve Colonial Court, Federal Life, and their thought was that they would try and do that as maybe phase 1.5 or phase 2, because they don't control all the sites.
Integrated with the possible second.
Right. Right. So they're very aware. That was where we started with this was, what are some of your ideas for how the whole area would come together? And their suggestion was pursue what you have in hand and use that to jumpstart other developments. What we have in hand is the lot that we control.
And the basic answer to that question, Chris, is yes, we are looking at the other properties along Milwaukee, recognizing the impact that the changes at that corner are likely to have, which for the most part will probably be negative to the existing shopping centers. But as they said, until we have more cooperation or interest in working with us from those property owners, we're very limited in how much we can really do at this point. Cheryl?
I remember having a conversation with a representative from, is it Clark? Yeah, Clark Street. And one of the things that I liked is that he seemed to have a good understanding of what we are in River Woods and why a previous development didn't go through and what our residents would be supportive of, balanced with what we could possibly get. And he seemed both realistic but optimistic at the same time.
Well, the representative that we've been working with grew up in Deerfield, so he
Yes,
is
that's the
familiar with the area and recognizes that we're not just a neighborhood of Deerfield, which is a step ahead of many other developers. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. The village ecologist is not here this evening. Police report.
Board has police activity in the packets. Of note, a couple of incidents. First on May 30th, at 4:30 in the afternoon, we took a report of a criminal damage to property at the Woodland Preserve. Somebody had burned offensive graffiti and hit people there. By the next morning, Rob had somebody go over there and paint it over, so it's not visible anymore. And then yesterday, at 8:40 a.m., we responded to a bank robbery at Chase Bank. So two masked.
Where? Can't hear you.
Police responded to a bank robbery at Chase Bank. Two masked gunmen entered the bank just after it opened and held up the tellers at gunpoint, and then escaped with an amount of money. And we are currently investigating and we're working with the FBI.
Okay, any questions for the chief? As I said, the trustee Haber, otherwise known as Habler, given his name tag at the dinner we were at Friday night. The good news is we have absolute proof that somebody was at the restoration center, because we always wondered how many people were there. The bad news is that they did damage to property while they were there. So we are contemplating ways to be able to safeguard that area and perhaps have some type of electronic observation Information items are short. I will start, since I mentioned the dinner that Trustee Haber and Trustee Chamberlain and their spouses attended along with me on Friday. That was a fundraiser for the Brushwood Center at Ryerson, which also recognized Robert Redford and his wife Sibylle for their work on the environment. And I think my two trustees are to be given commendations for having stayed there as late as they did, because dinner wasn't served until somewhere around 9:30. And they were stalwart troopers to be there, so I appreciate their helping show the support for Brushwood, which was not responsible for the late dinner, and I encourage all of you to go and visit. It's a true gem that we need to take more advantage of. Other items already mentioned by council. Walter Willis of SWAPCO will be here at the next meeting. Certainly he'll help review the contract for extension for the waste hauling if there's any questions. But he will also talk with you about some of the programs that SWAPCO has going right now. Talk with you about the countywide goal of 60% diversion, which nobody in the county is close to. Diversion being trying to divert 60% of the waste stream to recycling or somewhere else other than going in the landfills. But there are a number of programs that are out there, so I think it will be very interesting. But then again, I've been a member of SWAPCO for 25 years, so my life is garbage. The other thing is that just before that, the week before that, Trustee Chamberlain and I attended the Open Meeting Act training, which was actually very helpful. We learned a few good things, but I will point out to my fellow elected officials, the law now requires that no matter how many times you've been elected or taken the course, you have to take it every time you're sworn in. So if you have not taken the online course, you have to take the course on the Open Meetings Act. In the agenda, I provided the link to go to that. It takes about 20 minutes if you're distracted much of the time while you're doing it. Cheryl?
And I just wanted to mention that you want to then get your certificate to Irene, so that if you find yourself in my situation, and I can't remember if I took it again this term or not, I could just ask her if she has my certificate.
And just like you have to do the campaign or the finance disclosure, et cetera, which all of you got in, and I appreciate that. Also required is we have to have an Open Meetings Act officer, and I'm certainly looking for volunteers. No, I don't know what's involved in it, but no, she's the FOIA officer.
Open meetings.
This is the Open Meetings Act. The act requires that we have an open meetings officer. It just doesn't say what they're supposed to do.
I was going to say, if it involves no activity, I would volunteer for that.
Well, you'll get the appropriate increase in pay, so. Okay, and that's all I have this evening on information items. Are there any visitors wishing to address the board on items not otherwise on the agenda? Hearing none, then the first action item.
What were you just explaining just a minute ago? Would you go over it one more time? Just
I
what you were
assume
saying
you're talking about the.
that Irene said that she would do it.
Okay, no, the Open Meetings Act is the requirement that if certain number, half of a quorum of board members or any other group of people get together, they can't talk about village business and take final action. And under the act, amongst the things that we have to do is A, take training every time we're sworn in. We have to complete a new course. B, I have to appoint an Open Meetings Act officer, but that's easy. The thing is, I don't know what to tell anybody what's involved in the job because the act doesn't really describe what they have to do. Irene is, as village clerk, the Freedom of Information, or FOIA Act officer. She is responsible for responding on behalf of the village to any FOIA requests. Does that clear it up for you? If not, talk to me later, because it could go on forever. It's kind of a extensive subject.
Oh, you should go to your office
Okay,
Sunday.
we'll do that, and the police will come by. Okay, are there any other visitors wishing to address the board? If not, the first item of business is presentation of the 2017 audit and hopefully acceptance by the board. Ed?
Well, thank you for having me this evening. My name is Ed Tracy. I'm the audit partner with Selden Fox. We've been doing the audit for the last couple of years for Village. You should have a copy of the audit in the package. Our opinion, we give an opinion on the financial statements. Our opinion was an unmodified opinion that the financial statements were fairly presented in accordance with the modified cash basis of accounting, which is what the village uses. There has been some discussion at the state level as to whether that will be an acceptable basis of accounting going forward. And recent developments, bill has passed, it's at the governor's desk now, which will allow that to continue in any organization, any entity that's previously used that basis of accounting can continue to do so. On a government-wide basis, the governmental activities, which include all the activities other than the water and sewer operations, had revenue in excess of expenses of about $800,000, and the ending net position increased by about 4.6%. The business type activities, which consisted of water and sewer operations, had expenses exceeded revenues by $150,000 approximately, but that did include depreciation expense, so a non-cash expense of about $385,000. Government activities, again, these governmental activities, business type activities, are in what's called the government-wide financial statements. So these do include fixed assets, do include long-term debt. There was about $2.75 million in additions to capital assets this year, primarily the balance on this particular facility here. So the total, and then in addition, some office furniture, equipment of about $160,000, and some vehicles were added in the current year. Depreciation expense taken on the governmental capital assets during this year was about $275,000. Within the fund financial statements, which are on the cash basis accounting, within the general fund, revenues were about $800,000 over budget. Expenses were about $550,000 under budget. Both the administration department and the police department saw expenses under budgeted amounts by $276,000 and just over $200,000 respectively. And those savings were seen in both departments. Savings were seen in personnel costs, contractual services, and other areas as well, pretty much across the board. In 2017, there were two new SSA debt issues for $140,000 and $25,000. There was nearly $160,000 of SSA debt principal repaid in 2017. And at the end of the year, the village had outstanding debt, all of which was SSA debt of $1,365,747. And about $175,000 of that will be due in 2018. The other thing I wanted to kind of make mention of is, as it relates to the retirement plan obligations for the village and under IMRF, because the village reports on the modified cash basis, that particular liability is not recognized within the financial statements, but it is disclosed in the notice of the financial statement. And at 12/31/16, the net pension, wrong year, 12/31/17, the net pension liability was about $616,000, which was a decrease of about $20,000 to $30,000 from the prior year. And this net pension liability represents essentially the difference between the benefits earned to date by current and former employees of the village, which will be paid out in the future, versus the investment monies that are on hand at IMRF right now to pay those liabilities. IMRF gives you a percentage to pay based on current salaries. That's an actuarial estimate of what's needed now to make those benefit payments in the future. So there's that time value of money that's intended to close that gap. And then, so, the rate given by IMRF to make that payment assumes not only the current obligation, but also to pay down the existing obligation over what's now a 27-year period, and that's a state mandated timeframe to be fully paid on the benefit. So that number will fluctuate from year to year based on the investment return that IMRF gives versus what the actuaries estimate in their calculation. So you'll see that liability tend to fluctuate a little bit. I know some organizations, going forward the next year, we've seen IMRF returns that have been pretty good, so that liability has come down. I would anticipate that would be the case for the village here as well. But that liability is something that you continue to make the required contributions to IMRF, so as long as you continue to do that, the expectation is that liability will be taken care of and covered as long as you make those, as long as you're making your contributions. IMRF as a whole is a very well-funded plan. It's approximately 87 to 80% funded. Particularly in the state we live in, that's outstanding. And so I don't anticipate that that's, as long as, as I said, I tell all my clients, as long as you continue to make your required contributions to IMRF, that liability should be taken care of and shouldn't be an issue.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Just let me summarize for the history majors like me. One, the village is in good financial condition. And two, our debt, our pension requirements are fully funded as far as what the village needs to be contributing, and being a little short of 100% is normal because you're always paying in against the future.
Correct.
So we're in good shape there too.
Yes. Yeah, the village has always made the required contributions. As long as they continue to do so, there should be no issues.
I mean, I'm glad you can understand how it all works, but I think those are the questions most of us want to know in simple language. Are there questions from the board? If not, then do it.
I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to comment that I wanted us to look at the reserves in the water fund again. We said we were going to do that, and our auditors had a couple of comments for us in that area, so I'd like us to look at that.
Without question, we need to follow through on that. Take into consideration last year, we did have a large expense, but we still need to look at reserves, whether we're overfunded, underfunded, or properly funded as far as the reserves. And we should always look at that at least every couple of years. So, are there any other questions from the board? If not, I would like to ask for a motion to accept the audit.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Have a roll call, please.
Trustee Chamberlain?
Aye.
Trustee Ford?
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein? Trustee Haber? Trustee Holloman?
No.
Motion carries 4-1.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next item of business is presentation of the branding campaign and resolution approving logo, colors, etc. Jody and Ryan, if you would, please.
You bet. Thanks for having us. We're just going to get this set up. We'll take just 1 second.
It should be on as soon as you get plugged in.
Mayor, what's this for?
This is, the village has decided, in fact, it's interesting, I had a resident ask just this morning if we had ever considered something like this. But basically trying to create a brand for the village that we can market to realtors, etc., to be able to have A, better property values, B, try to make sure the residents who might be new and moving in recognize what the village is, what it's like, what the rules and regulations are, so that they won't be surprised when they come in locally be very much happier to be here, and we'll all be happier in the long run. As I'm sure our presenters can inform you, or some others on the board, perhaps even better than I, there's a great deal of data that supports the idea that if you can establish your own image, even as a community, you will do better on those various factors. And our neighboring communities certainly are. I know Deerfield and Bannockburn are doing so.
Now, is this also going to include written? Is this
Mike, okay, just a second. Can I ask Mike, would you simply wait, let them do their presentation, and then if you still have questions,
Sorry.
we can go forward.
I think the short answer is yes, we will have some written stuff in the back end. But before we get there, we know a handful of people in the room, we don't know everyone in the room, so we want to just quickly sort of let you guys know who we are. We're really excited to share where we've landed on this work with you guys. A lot of research has gone into it, a lot of conversations, a lot of comparator analysis, and a lot of creative work, honestly, and some writing. So we're excited with where it's landed, and we think it really resonates with the character of this village that we call home. We live here also. So my wife, Jody, do you want to introduce yourself, Jody?
I would love to do that. My name is Jody Nafta. We are 4 years in Riverwoods. We have 2 kids that go to the Wilmot Elementary School. One will be in Crusoe next year, in 2 days from now. And I have been Chief Marketing Officer. I've had my own brand agency for years. I just recently left Coyote at UPS and have been working on my own business for a while. So I've been doing this for about 20 years.
And I have sort of 15 plus-ish years in a similar space, mostly working for agencies, doing some consulting on the side for a handful of notable brands, several of which are up there on the screen. So we are professionals, I suppose that's what that means. And this is a typical approach. What we did for you guys is a typical approach that we would do for any of our clients. We built it based on the magnitude of the project. It's scaled appropriately based on our professional opinion to the size of the project in terms of the sample size of the people that we talked to and the number of comparators that we looked at. And so we're just going to kind of do a quick breeze through of this. And as we get towards the end, we'll sort of look to you guys to give some comment.
We're all the way at the end of our timeline here, so we have done quite a bit of work to get to this point, almost 6 months worth of talking to residents, researching comparators that Brian talked about. We did some surveys, we read everything that the village provided to us and then some, and we have been working for several months with the committee on this. And so, why brand, right? Why are we doing this?
Yeah, John mentioned at the opening remarks sort of some of the reasons, and he's absolutely right. Based on my professional research and the work that I've done, when there is a common purpose or a common cause or a common identity, it provides a rallying cry and a campfire for anything from an organization all the way down to a community. There are tons of proven studies that show that this is the case. The clearer that communication is, the clearer that the idea is at the center of that place, of that organization, the more likely people will pay attention to and listen to and sort of feel a common attraction to that general call. So that's largely what we were going at. It's not terribly complicated, but it does require sort of shining the light in all corners of the universe of the entity. And so in this case, it was looking at other communities. It was talking to residents. It was doing a lot of writing and brainstorming, doing some workshops and things like that. And the resulting work is a series of messages, a couple of narratives, and a lot of creative deliverables that will hopefully eventually see their way out to the world here and really tie, I think, the community together and signal to other communities and other entities, business entities, realtors and those kinds of professionals, what we care about, what's important to us, and why they have to pay attention to certain things and why we're different than other places to live.
So far we have delivered to the village a series of research documents that we did based on what I just described earlier. The updated expression system is a fancy word for logo, files, things like that, visuals, content, a communication plan to roll this out to the audiences it needs to roll out to, and then key messaging for all the areas that we want to update.
So as far as the discovery activities go, we sort of summarize them here. We talked to more than 30 people. Again, that's an appropriate sample size based on what we've looked at. All this is qualitative research. There was no quantitative research done, but we did look at some quantitative studies that we sort of bumped into online along the way. We conducted a comparator audit. We read the historical documents, all the stuff that sort of Jody already mentioned. But the main thing that we're going to present to you is sort of driving towards presenting out what a new logo would actually look like. I think we realized during the course of this project that Riverwoods doesn't actually have a logo. Riverwoods has a sign that sort of doubles as a patch and a logo on certain things. It's almost a city seal, less than it is a logo. And so creating something that feels a little bit more sort of true to the nature of the place and a little bit more streamlined, I think could go a long way. So we'll show you what that looks like at the end. That's the bonus for staying awake during this. So quick look at a comparator review. We wanted to look outside at other communities that look a little bit more like us. There aren't a lot of communities that look like us in terms of the natural environment, the way that we feel about that natural environment, our relationship with sort of the landscape, the history, the kind of community that we have. And so we looked at we deeply looked at sort of 4 different comparators. They're not one-to-one. A lot of these are more planned, newer communities, but they're trying to accomplish basically what we have. And they've done a few extra things that we haven't done and probably will never do. So that's why we call them comparators and not something else. So the 4 that we looked at were Saracen Farms, Tryon Farms in Indiana, Prairie Crossing, and Serenby. You might know a couple of those might seem familiar to you. Otherwise, I would highly encourage you to go to their websites afterwards and kind of look at them. They're really interesting communities. We're going to look at them just really quickly as I drive through them here. So Saracen Farms is located in Hampshire, Illinois. 114 single-family homes. Again, this is a purpose-built community that's really focused on sustainability, pastoral living with modern conveniences. It's a pretty high-end sort of planned community out west. Their messaging is all about convenience in an idyllic setting, a farm preservation community. It's only about 400 acres, so it's a bit smaller. 114 homes, and then there's a whole list of amenities up there. All these communities sort of go to market and really mention their amenities when they're marketing themselves to different groups, whether they be realtors, businesses that would want to come in and partner with that community to put on an event, or people that are looking to purchase properties within that locale. So for them, it's equestrian. I'm going to do a little bit more detail on this one than I will on the others, but equestrian community, 75% of the land is reserved for open space, community gardens, farmers market, community broadband service that's supplied by the community free of charge by living there. Bed and breakfast spa for those that want to have guests that don't want them to stay in their house. Estate management, running, walking, biking, and equestrian paths. There's sort of a common thread as we drive through the rest of these, but just a little bit more of what Saracen actually looks like. It is a wide open space. When they go to market, when they sort of present their material in public relations and market material, lots of photography of nature scenes, lots of photography of the grounds, and of these big spacious homes. Really presenting sort of what luxury could look like sort of out in the suburbs in this farm-like setting. Do you want to do this one?
Sure. Tryon Farm is in Indiana, Michigan City. This is a little bit more modern, custom homes, 170 acres, 120 are protected. The lot sizes are smaller, they're less than an acre. There's about 40 homes right now, but they have plans for more than like 100 or 115 homes. This is a lot. This environment is mostly second homes, not first homes. Again, when we look at amenities that they have on their website and that they have to those various, the realtors, prospective buyers, They talk about nature trails, freshwater swimming, community hall, historic barns, chickens, goats, beekeeping, native restoration. This is what it looks like. You can see a lot of people, happy people doing things outside, enjoying the environment. Big focus on family and community. The architecture is unique, so it does promote individuality. It's not just, one size fits all.
Yeah. The third community that we looked at was one called Prairie Crossing. Prairie Crossing is also sort of out west here in Illinois, Grace Lake, 360 homes, 36 condos, so mixed development sort of property. Messaging is focused on widely acclaimed conservation community. Again, a very sort of similar kind of theme. Really focused on setting aside a huge chunk of land, building property there, and sort of entrusting it to people that are going to live there to take care of it. Sort of a relationship give back to the community that you live in. 675 acre site, 70% of it is open space. Again, there's a common theme there. Standard lot sizes, and again, a whole list of amenities. A good amount of overlap aside from the beach, fish, canoe. Good amount of overlap with some of the stuff that we provide here, hiking and running trails. Some of the stuff that we're planning for future development, potentially in Riverwoods. Some of those things sort of show up on some of these lists.
Excuse me, how old?
Mike, you just please wait till they're done and then we agree for questions.
This is what it looks like from the air and what some of the other photos look like of the actual grounds. It's a really beautiful place, but again, it's not quite Riverwoods. Riverwoods has a much more rustic character to it and a much more sort of owner-proprietor sort of character to it. And it's less sort of maintained for us. They also have this really interesting thing, if you dig into it on their website, I'm just putting it in here, it's in the presentation, but it's a sort of key lessons for developers. There's some really interesting messaging points here. Again, thinking about one of our chief audiences was realtors and people that might come in and buy a home and tear it down and want to actually build a spec home here to sell. But it's a really interesting way to think about messaging to that specific audience and telling them what we care about in a way that doesn't feel off-putting, it still feels inviting, but setting clear boundaries so that you don't get as many ordinance violations.
In the business world, that would be called writing white papers or being an expert and speaking at conferences and things. They're sort of setting themselves up to be leaders in this space, and they're talking about it, and they're sharing their plans and their thought process for how they developed Prairie Crossing.
So there's 3 pages of that built into this deck, which will be available. And then the last one is Serenbe. Serenbe is the farthest away. It's in Atlanta. It's probably the most ambitious project out of any of these. 400 residents, 200 homes, 15% are built. They're planning for 1,200 homes. 3 restaurants, 8 retail stores. They're really building an entire community sort of part and parcel away from Atlanta.
A big focus on farm to table. They have a 25-acre organic farm.
A school, art galleries, shopping. So it's a different kind of environment, but still very focused on outdoor nature, community life, and really building a sense of community. And I think that's one of the things that was sort of interesting to all of these. They all have very clear identity systems, meaning their logo, their messaging is really consistent. They understand who the different audiences are that are really going to care about the information that they're putting out there.
And you can look at their websites and understand who they are, what they stand for, and what it might be like to live there.
And they all sort of talk about building community and taking care of community. And they do that for a reason, because that's that rallying cry that I'm talking about. If you sort of put an emphasis on community and togetherness, and you put a name on it, the brand or the identity, it makes it a little bit more likely that people will sort of bond together for a common purpose or a common cause, and understand the limits of what they're allowed to do within that community. So that's it for the comparator review. We want to talk to you a little bit about what we heard, because we did do we had a lot of conversations with people. Like I said, we talked to over 30 people.
They got to know my neighbors. It was really fun.
And we went into it with a series of hypotheses. This is often commonly the case. We had an introductory meeting with the committee that's been working with us. So here are a couple of quick sort of hypotheses that we had. The first one was that not everyone in Riverwoods cares the same way about our ordinances or stands for preserving the natural beauty of our village, and that we lack potentially a sense of community. That perhaps messaging would be needed to create, to meet different points of view across Riverwoods neighborhoods. Second one was that communication efforts have lacked, and we need a centralized, unified brand to rally around in order to gain participation and interest in preserving the woodlands, and that a unified brand story might be able to help in that process. The last one is that Riverwoods residents are not pulling their weight in preservation efforts, and perhaps they're unaware or were unaware during their buying process of the ordinances that govern the community. And that as a result, neighbors take notice, and it endangers long-term health of our woodlands. You know, once you make a decision on your property, you can't undo that decision. It takes years and decades to undo that decision to clear the line. So clearly setting boundaries was something that we were trying to think about. In terms of
When we
the
did the
breakdown,
interviews, it was a mix of new and tenured residents, ages too, new and tenured. We talked to people in Thorngate, Meadowlake, North and South Riverwoods. Some were trustees or serve on committees or hold village positions. Some were professionals, a lot worked from home. Many were retired as well. We had a script, but a lot of these conversations were improvised as well so that we could listen and hear more.
and a number of these were scheduled, and the rest of them took place at the grocery store, or in our home, or at our friend's home, or at
Walking the
events,
dogs.
or walking the dogs. We would stop people while we were walking our dogs and ask them 3 or 4 of the questions off the list and incorporate that into research. We wanted to get some stuff that wasn't so staged, sort of built into the feedback loop. Executive summary, there are 5 basic key highlights.
Residents share more characteristics than we thought. They want to give back, but just need to know where to plug in. It's not clear to them right now how to do that. Neighbors still play a key role in this community, just like they always have. And building a community is all about redefining amenities and creating opportunities.
One more.
Riverwoods is unlike anywhere else.
And I think this is probably the most important one. So no matter the background, no matter how long people have lived here, no matter what brought them here, that last sort of point sort of jumped up front, unprompted in every single conversation that we had with folks. So literally what we heard, there's another 20 pages behind this that we're not showing you. That's a deep dive into this section. We're showing you sort of a brief list of the basic questions that we were asking folks during the course of our conversation. So why did you choose to live in Riverwoods? How do you describe where you live? What do you love about Riverwoods?